both at home and abroad are celebrating the Lunar New Year, welcoming in the Year of the Rabbit. Hello, I'm Elaine Reyes, and the party is underway. China Media Group's major spring festival gala kicked off the festivities, marking the Lunar New Year with hundreds of millions watching the TV extravaganza around the world. It is the most significant celebration on China's calendar, with millions traveling across the country to be with their families. Here in the United States, Chinese Americans are the largest Asian ethnic group. And joining us to talk about the Lunar New Year and a new Chinese American museum is Executive Director David Uwe. Ted Xu is originally from Beijing. He currently teaches Chinese language and culture. And also with us is my colleague Gerald Tan. His award-winning Soul Food series takes us on an American journey through the Chinese kitchen. And for more than 2 decades, David Yao has been working outside government to foster better understanding between the U.S. and China. He is currently a senior advisor to the Chinese American Museum right here in Washington, D.C. David Yao, you grew up in Hong Kong. What are some of your favorite memories celebrating the Lunar New Year?
Good morning. Well, without a doubt, as a young kid, come Chinese New Year, all I had to say was in Cantonese, "恭喜發財," to people who visit our household during that season, and I would get money. That was wonderful. But beyond getting the little red packets, I remember our family celebrated by cleaning house and also really decorating in an old-fashioned way by getting plants like narcissus, putting little red bands of kind of festive colors around the stems, and even at times getting a tree, a peach blossom to celebrate the spring. So there are a lot of sweets that we kids could run around and start eating it to our heart's content. And so it was a very nice memories. And also we had firecrackers in those days. So it made a lot of noise in the neighborhood and people just loved it.
Family, food, and those red envelopes. Ted Xu, you immigrated from Beijing 23 years ago and teach Chinese language and culture. What do you try to impart to your students about the importance of this time of year? And what do you tell your students about the importance of this holiday?
Well, the culture is a big part of my teaching. So I always tell my students through all the traditional Chinese festivals, especially the Chunjie, the Spring Festival, first, the value of the family reunion remains strong for the 1,000 years. And also, I will teach them how to understand the Chinese culture, the traditions, and the meaning of them. For example, why we got the red envelope, what do we say when we see people to pay our New Year greetings, and also we will watch the famous CCTV Spring Gala show real time during class, and they love to see all the acrobatic performance, the magic, and also the martial arts. So it's a big time, and we also do the dragon dance in front of the whole school, and some music and some singing. So we also have our own version of the school-wide mini Spring Gala as well.
And Ted, personally, do you celebrate the way you celebrate here now? Is it much different than the way you used to celebrate in Beijing?
Well, I would say it's quite different because I've been here for over 20 years. So my memory about the Spring Festival celebration in Beijing was when I was very little. But there are 3 things I think I still remember. First is the big meal we all eat together. I still remember the first time I ate shrimp was during one of the big meal during the New Year. And also when we pay the New Year greetings to all the relatives and to all the elders, we sometimes do the ketou, and we got some money for spending. And also the Spring Gala, we always watch together. It's getting longer and longer now. I think it's over 5 hours, but I remember I tried to stay overnight and watch the end of that. I never made it when I was little. But for here, I was just like eating with my friends, and maybe we will go hiking and to appreciate the scenery view through the mountains, and also maybe watch a Chinese movie to celebrate.
So creating new traditions. Gerald Tan, you are our resident food expert. Of course, the food is such a big part of Lunar New Year. You've heard all of our guests so far describe the food they would have, just the time spent with family eating. What dishes, though, are specifically associated with Lunar New Year? I have my favorites, I know you do too, but just give us sort of a range.
Well, you know, the thing to talk about foods during the Lunar New Year is a lot of it's symbolic. You know, whether it's the way they sound or the way they look. So oranges, for instance, you're going to see all sorts of them, you know, and it's a big gift when you see family and friends, you get cartons of oranges because they sound like the word for gold. You might also get, for instance, tang yuan, which are these sticky mochi balls made of glutinous rice flour, and that stickiness represents cohesion, you know, togetherness, coming together. So all this is very symbolic, and of course we have to bring in noodles. You know, noodles so integral to the Chinese culture, and during Chinese New Year we talk about longevity noodles. I mean, you're going to see them at weddings, you see them at birthdays, but at New Year it's especially important. Ted talked about, you know, this family reunion that we have. Typically that's the night before the Lunar New Year, and there will always be noodles. And tradition has it that the cook should not cut it, should be one long strand, and really we should be slurping as well, but that's pretty impossible. And then I have to bring in dumplings, jiaozi. You know, it's so integral to our culture. And one is how it looks. You know, they're meant to resemble kind of ancient gold and silver ingots, so again, a symbol of prosperity. But more than that, it's the culture of coming together and making the dumplings. And in our show, you know, we interviewed two brothers who have a dumpling shop, and they just talk about how they found their way into their culture through food, because they remember, you know, like going to their grandmother's house, making the dumplings, sitting together, cooking the dumplings, eating the dumplings, and then making some more. So these are just some of the big dishes, you know, during the Lunar New Year.
It's the time spent making them and learning and passing that on to the next generation,
Tradition.
right, with your family. David Uy, I want to come to you next, but first, located just a few blocks from the White House, the Chinese American Museum works to advance the understanding and appreciation of the Chinese American experience. CGTN's Jim Spellman takes us inside for a first-hand look.
The Chinese American Museum in Washington features permanent exhibits that tell the stories of the many contributions Chinese people have made to American culture. Prominent trailblazers and everyday families, from the formation of the United States straight through to today.
There's this interactive video timeline which highlights key moments in the history of Chinese people in the United States.
Rotating special exhibits highlight specific topics, like this one focusing on Taoism. The highlight, intricate robes worn by priests during Taoist ceremonies. Don Lee is the curator.
Taoism teaches us to live in harmony with nature, the sun and the moon, the earth, and for Chinese, being in the outer environment and be harmonious in that environment is very important.
The Chinese American Museum provides an opportunity to experience exhibits like this that are not often seen in other museums.
Visitors are invited to leave a message. Some are written in Chinese and some in English. This one reads, "I hope our country will find its better angels, tolerance, respect, and understanding rather than ignorance and division."
The China from China exhibit details some of the first contacts between Americans and Chinese. In 1784, traders left New York for Shanghai. The ship returned 15 months later with porcelain items made by Chinese artisans. Richard Dietrich is curator.
So some of this early China that came from China was owned by the first U.S. president, George Washington?
Yes. Yes, so these two in the middle were owned by George and Martha Washington. This was so important to George Washington that he put in an order for this dinner service on that maiden first voyage to China.
Those early American merchants valued the craft of the Chinese artisans and were proud of the friendships they formed with many Chinese traders.
The Chinese really welcomed these American traders, and the Americans had a lot of warmth between them and the business people they were working with in China. It's all people to people, right? I mean, that's the thing that I think is that we always have to fall back to.
The Chinese American Museum in Washington is presenting valuable opportunities to enhance people-to-people exchanges.
Why is this museum important?
Wow, it's like a home. The content and the artifacts here speak right to me. Somewhere that we can come to discuss about the topics that we care about, and to really open the hearts to the different cultural aspects of themselves.
Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
David, Chinese people have been in the United States for more than 200 years. There are other Chinese American museums in this country, but why was it so important to have something here in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we are building the first and only museum here in DC that's focused on the Chinese American experience. And yes, there are Chinese American museums, great museums around the country. They do tend to focus more regionally. We here in DC, we're trying to take somewhat of a national perspective and look at Chinese Americans across the country. And so it really is an opportunity, quite frankly, to place a flag in the ground in this city of museums to really illustrate to the people that are here and the 24 million visitors to DC each year that Chinese American history and our story is a big part of American history, not something that's adjunct to, but something that's integral to the American story.
You mentioned all the tourists that visit Washington, D.C., but really, who is your target audience there at the museum? And what would you say is the museum's main message?
Certainly, Chinese Americans tend to be very interested in this museum, but we're really building a museum for everyone. Part of what we want to do as a Chinese American museum is, yes, illustrate how Chinese Americans are part of the American landscape, but we also hope that anyone that comes to visit this museum, regardless of their heritage, really sort of opens their hearts and minds to all immigrant stories so that we realize that, we're the sum of many parts.
David Yao, let's talk about the tradition of bringing family together during this time. We elaborated a little bit about the food a moment ago, but I want you to focus on the gathering. Do you think we see here outside of China the same sort of effort to be with family that we see in other, over there in China, with people making the effort to spend time with family for a couple weeks, making those long journeys? Is there something similar here?
I think so. Of course, Chinese New Year not being recognized in United States officially makes things a little bit more difficult. Kids usually have school. People have to work and travel for business, stuff like that. But I think we, as a community, do our best because we all understand there's this kind of cultural significance of coming together to celebrate the Chinese New Year, especially the dinner before the Chinese New Year's Eve. So whichever way we can, those of us who are in town will get together. But I know a lot of school districts, Chinese American community have been lobbying school districts to allow students at least to take one day off or charge it a person day or something like that, so that we can better celebrate this significant annual event in the Chinese culture.
Yeah, I think you do see that in certain cities. I know with my daughter going to a Chinese immersion elementary school, they did have the day off or had a long weekend for Chinese New Year, which was really, really incredible. Ted Hsu, let's talk about traditions evolving over time. And we talked about the red envelopes. Now we also see these digital red envelopes. Has technology changed the way that Lunar New Year is celebrated?
Oh, definitely. Times have changed, and I think they brought tremendous change to many things. For example, like you mentioned, we use a digital red envelope now. I remember that we're all in the same chat group, and one friend sent out, or one family member sent out a digital red envelope that everyone is trying to fight for it and see who is a quicker clicker. And I think offline, the involvement of the technology also changed a lot of the ways to travel. For example, the high-speed railway has tremendously reduced the traveling time for the people coming back home. They used to travel days to go to see their families. But now, for example, from Beijing to Shanghai, it's like a little bit over 4 hours. And also, when the traveling time are shorter, they can have more time with their families. And also, I think they really enjoy the online watching the live streaming of the Spring Gala and other Chinese New Year TV shows. So it definitely changed both online and offline.
What about generational differences? Do you see any generational differences in the way that Chinese New Year is celebrated?
Yeah, I think the traditional way is more likely, like we have talked about, to have a big meal at home and also go to your relatives and friends to pay the New Year greetings. But the younger generation, they want to celebrate. Some friends I know, they travel through the New Year and see the sunrise of the first day of the New Year. And some of them just go to hang out with the friends and have some firecrackers, fireworks. So definitely different generations show the different ways of celebration. But the one thing that everyone remains together is the value of the family reunion.
Gerald, we are coming into the year of the rabbit. Is there any specific food that can be eaten that is considered lucky or auspicious for this specific year, or is it just apply to any?
You know, all the specific dishes and items I mentioned before, they really do apply for every Lunar New Year. And in fact, with each year, you don't actually have one, oh, we've just passed, the year of the tiger, you should be eating this. But what it is because Chinese food is so allegorical, it's so visual, it's so poetic sometimes. So you can kind of tap into that and get a dish that maybe resembles the animal. This year, you're seeing a lot of restaurants saying, why don't we serve rabbit? And bring some traditional Chinese recipes into, using rabbit as the main protein. You'll see buns shaped as rabbits, little desserts. But I think what will be really quite popular this year is the White Rabbit Company. Now, anyone who's grown up in a Chinese family or community will know this. This is a sweet. It's almost like a milky taffy, soft and chewy. It's been made in Shanghai since the Second World War, and it's characterized by this film of paper that's made of glutinous rice. And so as a kid, everyone's unwrapping this and then eating the inner wrapper before you get to the candy. And it's actually become so popular and such an icon of Chinese culture that when Richard Nixon visited China in 1972, one of his gifts was a box of White Rabbit candy. And now you're seeing certain places here in America even doing White Rabbit candy ice cream, special for the Lunar New Year. So you might see a lot of that.
We'll have to keep an eye out for that. We've been talking about White Rabbit ice cream. David Uy, the museum showcases past history and contemporary Chinese Americans. There's also the influence of Chinese American culture and how it's a bit different from China. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, as a Chinese American museum, we focus on Chinese in America, but we do talk about Chinese cultural topics. We try to do it in the context of Chinese in America and, showing the influence not just on Chinese Americans, but on all Americans. So we are really looking at how Chinese Americans are quite diverse, not necessarily recent immigrants. We have 5th and 6th generation Chinese Americans. We have Chinese Americans that have been here almost since the beginning of American history. So we are really trying to show the breadth of all those topics when talking about, our particular group.
David Yao, much has been made of the United States being a melting pot. Several different communities have their own celebrations. St. Patrick's Day, for example, there's Cinco de Mayo. But Chinese Americans make up the largest Asian group in the country. Chinese culture plays a big part. We see it in a lot of places here in this country. So how does the celebration unfold into the fabric of the United States?
I think all these cultural significant dates, like you mentioned, St. Patrick's Day, Columbus Day, I think they all play a major role in America in that they reminds us of that unless you are Native American or First Nation, we're all immigrants. So the fact that even for Chinese New Year, because of the Chinese diaspora to various parts of the world over the last couple of hundred years, we all bring to America slightly different ways of celebrating Chinese New Year. For instance, well, in Hong Kong, we have the family dinner with certain dishes. I think it's been mentioned that noodles is an important thing, but also in Hong Kong, one thing I remember was that we always had to eat the Buddhist, the vegetarian meal, zai, because all the ingredients have good connotations, wonderful sounding names that can be made to feel you're eating precious items to celebrate New Year. But also, one different way of doing things is that my wife, she's born in Singapore, and apparently in Singapore and Malaysia, they come up with a salad with fresh ingredients, shrimps and chicken parts, and some sauce, and they literally toss it into the air because apparently the culture that they evolved into us by tossing these ingredients in the air, mixing them up, it also brings good luck. So it's something that growing up in Hong Kong I didn't know about until I met and married my wife. So it's wonderful for everyone coming from different parts of the world to bring their subcultural differences and celebrate it here in America. And being a melting pot, yes, I've heard that many times, but if I may quote the late Norman Mineta, his take was, it's the American tapestry. Because with our cultural backgrounds from different parts of the world, we should keep those particular traditions alive, but all put it out there for everyone to see that there are these subcultural differences and variations that we should remember and celebrate in our own ways.
David brought up one of my favorite dishes. I grew up in Malaysia, and the dish that David was talking about is yisang, which translates to raw fish. And it is indeed a giant salad that you might have fried taro and carrots and cabbage and pomelo. And in the middle of it, you'd have just raw fish. You douse the sauce over it, and what it is you have to bring everyone around the table to bring your chopsticks, you go right in, and you toss these salads, and you mix the dressing and the sesame seeds and the powder. And there's something really communal about it, and that is in fact going to be my first tradition and the first dish I always serve during my reunion dinner. I'm away from family now, living here in America, but when I bring my friends here together, I introduce them to exactly this dish. And it is something really quite wonderful, that you don't have that in mainland China quite yet, but it is now starting to be known. And there are a few restaurants I've found in southern China and in Hong Kong which will serve this, and they also call it yusheng, which is Singaporean.
I would love to see that in person. I'm coming to your house, Gerald. Ted Hsu, talk to us about the Year of the Rabbit and explain for our audience what that means going forward and what we should look for.
Well, I think we talk about the every zodiac animal in the Chinese calendar system has their own meanings. But every them come with some positive. For example, for the rabbit, it should be very smart, very sharp, and very fast. So I hope that should, going forward, means everyone should have a more happy, more faster development, and a lot of smooth on their career and on their studies. And I appreciate that people mentioned about the big rabbit candy, which I have one to share with my students very soon.
Wow.
This is also my childhood memory. This is a little bit slightly bigger than what I ate, but I'm glad I can find it in the Chinese market here.
Wow, that is amazing. We are so jealous, Gerald. You're loving that, I can tell.
Mine is about this big, and here he has a life-size one. I would dig right in.
It's like 3 times bigger, but we're gonna share.
We're going to share. We'll have you over. Gerald, you mentioned that you grew up in Malaysia, and we talked a little bit about diaspora.
Right.
And everyone celebrating in different regions of the world, and some of these traditions that you keep with you. Are there any other culinary differences? You talked about the salad, but otherwise, to me, it sounds like there are so many other things in common. Are there any other differences from Malaysia to Singapore to here in the United States and people who are celebrating in Europe?
Right, well, I think by and large, a lot of it still is quite similar across the board. When you talk about your dumplings and your noodles and peanuts and sunflower seeds. But you also have to think about it in that the Chinese diaspora, a lot of them went to Southeast Asia, and we have Vietnam, for instance, where Tet, so the Lunar New Year is also Tet. And for them, they have a really, a whole range of important dishes. One of it is bánh chông, which is a glutinous rice cake, which is square, and it's got minced pork inside. They also have bánh tét, which is the same thing, but in a conical form. So that's, one thing that you get in Vietnam. But Malaysia, Singapore, I think definitely the one that stands out would be the yisang.
David Uy, the relationship between China and the United States is a very, very important one. We talk about it all the time. But as we all know, it's gone through some difficult times, some tensions in recent years. What would you like to see happen in the new year, and what are your hopes for the upcoming Lunar New Year?
Well, I think Lunar New Year is a great opportunity to make the point that, not unlike the Western New Year, it's about love and family and bringing people together and renewal. And, that's what we hope for the new year. As Chinese Americans, we have an American point of view where, we wish the best for our country, but we also, our hearts are with China and the Chinese diaspora, and we hope for better understanding so that people can separate the people from the governments and separate people from the country itself. And, I think that that's the first step for a common understanding. So, we're very excited about Lunar New Year because it brings a lot of attention to Chinese Americans and Chinese culture. But, on Sunday, we're going to be in the DC Lunar New Year parade, which in the past has brought about 30,000 people to the sidelines. So, it really is heartwarming to be able to be part of something that is not only sharing a culture, but also, having people also see the similarities that we all share.
And David Yao, anything you would like to add as we say hello to the Year of the Rabbit on that note?
Well, I wish that this year will be really the year to break out of the doldrums we have been in the last 2 or 3 years. Obviously, we're full of hope, but also I wish everybody good health and just to take care of ourselves better, and so that we can enjoy life and and enjoy each other's company and learn about what's going on in the rest of the world.
And Ted Chu, anything you would like to add as we say hello to the Year of the Rabbit, things that maybe you're teaching your students about this important relationship?
Yeah, I hope everyone stay happy and healthy. And of course, I wish that we could travel to China like we did before, sooner than we know. And also, I wish all my students and all the students who are learning Chinese and Chinese culture around the world to have more love and passion about learning the culture and the language. It's great.
Gerald Tan, you get to close us out.
Well, I echo all our other, my fellow panelists to say good health, happiness, world peace, and traditional for us, we say 恭喜发财, 恭喜发财, and yes, Happy New Year to you, Lee.
All right, as well to you and everyone else, Gerald Tan, David Yao, David Uy, and Ted Chu, thank you so much for joining us for this special show. We appreciate your time, and Happy Year of the Rabbit to all of you as well. And stay with CGTN America for coverage of Spring Festival and all Lunar New Year festivities. I'm Elaine Reyes. Thank you so much for watching.